Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll be covering how data professionals can get more out of Snowflake and other database management systems with Aqua Data Studio. So I'm really excited today to have our presenter, Lisa, here with us. Lisa is a senior product manager at IDERA. She has over 25 years of experience, and she's spoken at several webcasts in the past. She's the expert for our Aqua Data Studio product. We're really excited to have her here today. So with that being said, Lisa, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Again, we're going to cover how data professionals can get more out of Snowflake and other database management systems with Aqua Data Studio. I'm going to cover the database management systems first, so we're all on the same playing field, and then I'm going to cover the architecture a little bit, and then I'm going to talk about the roles and how does Aqua Data Studio help you with your Snowflake and your other database management systems, particular to those specific roles. So you have relational and NoSQL platforms. Or relational databases like MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, SQL Server, those represent data in tables and rows, and they are based on a branch of algebraic set theory known as relational. You usually have a parent and a child relationship. Meanwhile, non-relational, NoSQL databases like MongoDB represent data in collections and JSON documents, and they're usually stored on some type of server. Now, Hadoop started doing that a long time ago, and the Apache Hive architecture got a little bit confusing, and so you usually have to go through some type of distribution that adds to the complexity of getting to those. You have Impala, Spark, Hive, and usually you need to get to those file systems through some type of distribution. You also have the warehouses, and so data warehouse is defined as a central repository where information is coming from one or more data sources. You have three different main types of data warehouses. You have your enterprise data warehouses that centralizes a business information from multiple sources and application, and it makes it available to you for doing analytics. It uses across the organization, and it can be housed on-premise or in the cloud. And we're going to talk about the architecture in a couple of minutes. There's also the operational data store. This is a central database that provides a snapshot of related data from multiple transaction systems for operational reporting. And snapshot's the key word because it enables the organization to combine that data from original format and various sources into a single destination and make it available for you. You also have your data mart, which is basically a condensed and more focused version of the data warehouse. And that reflects the regulations and processes specific to each business unit within an organization. Now, it doesn't have to be a business unit. This is the typical definition, but sometimes organizations divide up their data based on different variances. And so it doesn't have to be true to form, but it is usually a subset of data from within there. Now, I always get asked, what's the difference between a data lake and a data warehouse? A data lake is a vast pool of raw data, the purpose for which is yet not defined, but I don't find that true anymore either. It depends on your company, because data lakes, as they started storing more data, they started to make sense of that data as well. So keep in mind that you have your data warehouses, and Snowflake supports your data warehouses and your data marts. A typical data warehouse architecture will look something like this. You'll have your relational databases or your database platforms, whatever you have. You have some type of ERP or some type of financial, manufacturing, or some type of critical software that you're going to bring in the data that you need to see. And then you might have some purchase data that you're purchasing data to help with your business. You might have some legacy systems, and somehow all this data needs to be transformed and put into the data warehousing. IDERA has a tool called Warescape that does this for you, but it brings it into the data warehousing. And then from there, they divide it into independent data marts, and then architectural data marts, and then reporting tools. The key is, how do you report on all this data? You want to report what you did on your business 2 years ago versus what you're going to do in 5 years, and you want to make sense of that data. Now, when we talk about architecture specifically for Snowflake, the providers are Google Cloud, AWS, and Azure, and it's housed on the cloud. to cloud infrastructure. So I looked up cloud infrastructures and I looked up hybrid infrastructure, so I'm going to show you. And this is the basic cloud infrastructure that I could get. So you have that application that I talked about, whether it be Salesforce, ERP system, whatever it is, some financial distribution or whatever. You have your platforms, which could be your relational database or your NoSQL or whatever. You have some house where you're housing your information you need to get to it. Somehow you're deciding who can get in. So you have some type of security and contact management, and then you have some type of infrastructure where you're getting through a network or somehow you're getting to the cloud. And then you have your peripherals on how you're getting in, what you're doing with the data, whether you're getting a laptop, whether you're getting in with your phone, you're at lunch, you need to look up something on your phone, and how do you get to that? And that's the cloud infrastructure that you're normally getting to. Most businesses today have some type of hybrid infrastructure. So they're still in the process of moving all their data. They still have old legacy systems where they're keeping their relational data or their data, Hadoop or whatever it is, they're keeping this, and they have some type of application layer and their database layer. And then they have some type of connection where they're getting to the internet, and they might have a hosting region now that they need to get into the cloud. And this one was specifically for Amazon Web Services and how they get to that and how do they get to the cloud and what they need to do from that. So that's an example of the hybrid infrastructure. Now, as we talk about the people who are using these particular databases and people, the roles and responsibilities, these roles cross over in a lot of different areas, and it depends on the size of your business, but these are the typical ones. You usually have some type of application developer or application database administrator who's controlling that ERP or Salesforce or whatever it is, and the application developer is usually coding in some type of C++ or some type that's relevant to that particular application. You could have your application database administrators making sure that that application is always up, that the size is going to grow, that nobody's conflicting with anybody, and that they can always get to it. It's critical. Your database developer and database administrator kind of do the same thing as application developer and database, but they're managing the database. So database developers is writing scripts, he's using SQL or JSON, depending on the database type, and your database administrator needs to make sure that database is up and running and that particular management system is available. Now, your business analysts, your data analysts, and your data scientists, those are the people on the far right, based on that data warehousing structure, that need to report on the data. They need to get to the data. They need to quickly make sense of it. They need to track over periods of time. They need to get to that data and make sure it's available, and somehow they need to report on it. And then you have a data architect or a data modeler, somebody who's making sense of that. They're building either a data warehouse from scratch or the reverse engineering, and they're getting a graphical representation of what that data looks like. They might be building it, they might be forward engineering or reverse engineering, and so they need to see it. Then you have the IT people that are the systems administrator and IT manager. You need to make sure that everybody has access. They can get to the networking, they're controlling it, they have the right software, they're doing what they need to do. And then you might have an IT consultant or multiple IT consultants if you're on a big ERP implementation come in, and then you need to make sure that they can get access to all these different platforms, and what do you do with that? So how does Aqua Data Studio help you with Snowflake, and how does it help you with all these different types of databases and architectures and all of this data that you have to deal with? Well, Aqua Data Studio is a universal database IDE and visual analytic tool for IT professionals working with data and databases. It supports over 40 database platforms, whether relational, NoSQL, and cloud databases, and it allows you to develop and manage your databases and access, import, and export and visually analyze this data. These are the 40 database platforms that it supports. I have Snowflake highlighted over here from the data warehousing, but you could have big data, Teradata. You could have the different flavors of MySQL, Amazon Aurora MySQL, Google SQL Cloud. You also have an Excel file if you need to get to it. We store data in Excel files all the time, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then you have the different distributions for Hive and Power and Spark, those connectors that I was telling you need to get to, Amazon EMR, Cloudera, and all those. So these are all the 40 database vast systems that Aqua Data supports. And how do we go about servicing all those roles that I talked about, all those professionals before? there's a theory, there was some terminology that was DevOps and data ops. And DevOps was development and operations working together and be able to communicate and collaborate so that they weren't missing things. And there's all these studies being done on how we need to have particular people on those particular teams working together. Then data ops was the same thing, but it was people who were reporting on the data, those people who are the analysts and the operations and the developers when it came to storing the data. And how do they communicate and collaborate? Well, Aqua Data Studio helps all those particular roles do that. You are going to register your server and your database. These are the primary features, but because this is such a mature product, I can't cover all the features within an hour. So I'm going to cover just the basics, and some of the advanced, I think, get skipped a little bit. So you register your server and you build this data navigator tree or explorer over here, and then you're going to somehow analyze that data and pull data out. You're going to query the data. And if you're on a relational database, you're going to use SQL, structured query language, and if you're using NoSQL, you're going to use JSON. You also want to import data and export out, and we have a new JSON importer that we added in here, as well as import capabilities within SQL. We also have a query builder because we cover those 12 personas and those 12 roles. You might have people on your team who are not as advanced. They're not used to writing SQL. They've never dealt with that before. They're just reporting. And so how do we go about helping with that? I'm going to cover that. And then you have a table data editor to actually manipulate the table data if you have access to do so, and then report on it with the visual analytics. Then we have some tool sets here to compare the data, to import, export, to schema compares for developers and DBAs, and then to model that data from the ground up. And then for the advanced users, we have database administrators. For those databases, need to see if the instance is up, need to control the files, and they need to make sure they're comparing and doing some advanced tool sets from within. So how do you register Aqua Data Studio in your server registration? Well, as you can see, you have these platforms over here, which is the 40 database platforms plus ODBC, Excel, and some things over here. I'm going to register Snowflake, as we talked about Snowflake. I want to specify it's a production database, and I want to color it red. Now, I'm a visual person, so I like to see the colors. You don't have to put any colors or specify its production or any of this when you're registering it. But as you're going to see, the way I work is that when I'm updating or inserting data, I can clearly see I'm working in a production database environment. So that kind of gets in the back of my head, do I really want to do that? And then we've added some security on top of Snowflake. So you have Snowflake authentication, which we started supporting Snowflake a little over a year and a half ago, and so we've added this functionality. So we started with Snowflake authentication, and we added single sign-on authentication and key pair authentication for setting up your Snowflake. What's nice about Aqua Data Studio is no matter what database platform, this looks the same. The GUI looks the same no matter what database platform that you're using. The right-hand side is just context sensitive to what database platform you're using. Then I'm going to test the connection. I'm going to mount some scripts if I want to, and I'll show you how to do that later in advance. I'll specify the folder, and then I'm going to click OK, and it's going to build a tree for me. Now, there's capability that I told you I wanted to cover that's more advanced for people that somehow gets overlooked, and those are the tabs up here. You have your filter, advanced, driver, permissions, script, fluid shell, and connection monitor, and I'm going to quickly cover what those do. The filter I'm going to cover on the next screen and show you how it actually works. The advanced, if you're on a data warehouse, so we're talking about Snowflake mostly, you can set it to write. So if you don't want people to be able to, you can set it to read or write. If you don't want people to write actually the database, you can click this on or off, and there's some things you can do it. You can also enable database filters for queries, select some parameters that you want to do within in the query tool, and then you can set your driver here. We deliver the drivers that come with the different database platforms, but sometimes they'll update the driver and they'll go to new versions, and so sometimes you can replace the driver and manage that. We also support many languages, so sometimes you want to select your character coding and stuff from within here. Permissions, like I said, because we have such a vast people who use the tool and we make it usable for so many people, roles and responsibilities that, like I said, I can control who can do select statements, who can insert, and who can update or delete on a particular database. So it's very customizable from within there. I can also launch a script when I'm logging on to Aqua Data Studio, which is nice. So when I set up this Snowflake, I can say launch this script. I know my boss goes home every weekend and he updates an Excel spreadsheet, and I want to load that spreadsheet every time I log on to this particular database, so I don't have to think about it. I can also schedule that with the tool sets if I want as well to be more advanced, but I can set it up for different instances here. If I'm a person who's very advanced and I use a command line tool, I can turn on the echo commands and I can edit them from within here. If I want to see a connection monitor and I want to ping the connection at a certain time, I want to idle the connection and the thresholds to be able to control it, or if I want to automate the commits at a certain time. I know somebody walks away from the desk and I need to commit periodically. I can set that up to do that from within here. So within Aqua Data Studio, I registered my server. I built this tree over here. Now, if you can see on the left-hand side, Snowflake Test, see all those databases? Those are all the databases that I have access from Snowflake. Well, I have such a big group that I might be managing, or I might not. I may only need access to 3 of these databases. I want different groups to have different access to databases, but I don't want to have to figure out their roles and deal with all that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exclude the databases that'll show up in the tree and only add these 3. So as you can see, I've only added these 3. Then I click save and I have it go. As you can see, Aqua Data Studio is very customizable because right here I have my workstation. I have all my databases listed on the left-hand side, my file types, my compares, my file types that were Excel, everything loaded over here. I can drag and drop these. And then I have my working area in the middle. And behind here, I have a query analyzer. So I built this tree. One more look. Within Aqua Data Studio, you can right click on anything, and there's so much functionality because it is such a mature product that it does kind of enhance what's delivered with the database platforms because we allow you to do so much more. There is 20 years of development inside this tool right here. So what we do is we can create a schema, clone a schema, alter, because I'm highlighted on the schema and it's context sensitive. If I was highlighting it on a particular table, then I would be able to drop the table, load the table. There's specific things that I can do specified upon there. And then I can get to my tool sets and my DBA tools right from within here and the query analyzer. So that's how you register a server and database and build the Navigator Explorer. On top of that, you have so much functionality with options and more options that you have a general tab on being able to make this more customizable. You can make your JavaScript editor to look a certain way and have a look and feel. Your XML editor, same thing. Your query builder, you can have your result set, different colors. There's a lot of customization you can do. So this could be as advanced, or you can just select the defaults and go running. So I'm going to select the defaults, but then I go, you know what? I'm adding Snowflake, so I only want to see what I want to do for Snowflake. So what can I do specifically for just Snowflake? So I did a search in here for Snowflake, and we standardize at our particular company our comments to look the same way. So I'm going to click the comments on to look this particular way. I'm going to set my quote identifiers to be something, and I'm going to set my statement separator to be how I like to work. So I quickly click on this, and then I have it set up. So now I have selected inside the SQL query editor. As you can see, I have my tree. I can say script object to window as a select statement, and it'll open up this query builder right from within here. Now, in other tools, it's called a SQL editor, so you can get to that. We also have a JSON editor for NoSQL. So I can right click and say, put the select statement from within here if I'm not familiar with writing a select statement. If I only want to pull or edit the table data for the top 1,000 rows, I can click here and it'll load where I'm context sensitive into that, and then it'll run from within here. So there's all kinds of things I can do. I can also go to the main screen and do my queries within here, and you can see I have way more execute. I have options. Here I have 2 query statements that I've typed ahead select from doctors, and I have 2 result sets. That's another additive that you have above using a particular database. Usually it's 1 result set. They do one thing at a time. It's very different from using it from within here. So I can show the SQL history of what I ran, and I'm going to show that in the next couple screens. And then I can see the explain plan. What route did I take on these particular queries if I need to refine them? So that's kind of for an advanced user who doesn't know. If I'm the new user on the team and we have junior people versus advanced people and I'm not used to writing scripts, we help you with that. We automate some of these. So we automate an insert statement. I need to insert a particular data into a row. I need to insert into or update a statement, update a table. Then I put in introduce update statement, and it'll guide me through what I need to do from within there. So it's very intuitive based on how you work or for new people. Not only do you have the query editor analyzer, you have a JSON editor as well. And this is just one more example of where I have two select statements here for Snowflake, and I have the result sets and I customize and color coordinate it within here. Now I can export the data into Excel, CSV. I mean, there's all different kinds. I can do XML. There's all kinds of things that I can do with this data set. I can edit the data set directly from within here, all from within this tool set. And I can run one script and have one result set or multiples from within here. So it's very customizable from that aspect as well. If I am an advanced user and I want to multi-select and I want to build a script because I don't want to have to think about doing that, now that I set up the options to use my scripting, it will take on those parameters and format it the way I have it do it. And I can multi-select in here. I have the orders table, employee table, address type, and person, and I'm going to select those script object to window as a create. I'm creating new tables on my test box, and I'm going to use it. I can create script object to window new as I'll have some different objects as select, script object to generate a template script. There's a lot of different things I can do from a multi-selection from the tree view. So that tree view is extremely powerful within Aqua Data Studio for manipulating stuff. If you are new to Aqua Data Studio or you're a junior on the team, not only do we have the advanced tools for the DBA above for doing multi-scripts, but we kind of guide you with the query builder, which will help you build those queries. So you can take your tree view table and you can drag it to the right-hand side. And what it's going to do is when I looked at that table data, I said, I want to see the territories that were Canada. How do I go about doing that? I have no idea how to write a SQL statement. Well, I drag the table over here. It's going to select from this, and then I can put in some parameters where territory is equal to Canada, and its screen's going to pop up immediately when I put territory in here, and it's going to guide me how to create that select statement. And then I can see the select statement and see the results. Here's another view of the query builder. I dragged and dropped these tables. There's a relationship between them, so I can create a relationship or I can see the relationship between them. And then here's the SQL statement. As you see, before I was on the grid on the prior screen. Here I'm on the SQL statement, so you can see what exactly SQL, and then I'd have messages if I had a problem. So I can quickly build those for people who are new or analytic people who are not used to writing queries and dealing with the database. It allows me to do that. For people who are paying for the queries, like if you want to Google BigQuery, I want to see some stats. I want to see some statistics. How long did that query run? What was the count number? How many rows were affected? All that, because I'm paying for these. So based on that, I can get some stats quickly. I can also get them on the screen prior because it gives me like the number, the average counts and all that. But if I want to go into this particular tab, down here, when I run those statements, I can see what the stats are. So from a database perspective, it allows me to communicate and collaborate with what statements that I ran. If I'm querying MongoDB or non-SQL database, you can see the difference in the tree between the databases. I now have collections instead of tables. And so now I can use something that's applicable to that and query that particular data set based on what type of database platform then I'm getting to. So I no longer had tables or any of that. So now I'm using MongoDB. Now, because I have so many database platforms, I want to see a SQL history that I ran. So not only am I going to get the history on that particular database, but I'm going to get the history and store the history. However, I specified it up here so I can see what I ran the last 200 history or the last statement. So 100 statements, and then I auto archive based on that. So here you can clearly see what I ran. It highlights down here, so I can cut and paste or double click it, and it'll automatically pop it in the editor. So when my boss comes up to me and says, hey, can you pull up the data on SQL Server? You gave it to me last week. I can go, oh, geez, SQL Server. What was that? I'm trying to figure out, what did I do last week? So clearly I can see from here, and I can populate the data and pull up the data from within the SQL History tab from within there. Now I discussed the right-click capability that you have within the tree view. I'm just going to discuss a little bit about some of the tools and how it's customizable. We talked about the multi-selects and how you populate that into the query. You also have tools for working within Aqua Data Studio right from the right-click menu. So if I were on the tree and I click Tools for Snowflake, I would see that I have all these available to me. I can import data, export data in different formats. Like I said, we can import and export JSON, we can import CSV, Excel, a bunch of different types of formatting text files. I can object search for particular objects if I'm not exactly sure where they're located, and I can generate scripts, schema script generator, like I said in the multi-selects. I can diagram specific, and I can create a scheduled task. So for that particular Excel file where my boss wanted me to create a task and update the data, I could do that weekly or daily or whatever, instead of doing it every time I connected that database. Not only do you have that, if you're testing or if you're a tester or if you're a DBA, you need to see how fast your database is going to grow, or if I have 10,000 rows of data, I can randomly generate table data generator, and I can have it make sense or not make sense, and I can populate the table data on that so I can see some sizing. I can also data mask some of the data. So if we're on a project and we have HR data in there and I want my developers to do some room, but I don't want them seeing the salary of their coworkers, I can mask some of that, and so they don't have to see it. Also the social security numbers and things like that. So it can be pretty detailed on what we want to do that. Recently, we added the DBA tools menu. So you can get this from the main menu, these tools, or you can right click. This is from the right click. Inside of Aqua Data Studio with our Snowflake, with adding Snowflake, and we have these for different database platforms. Depending on which database platform, we offer different tool sets that are applicable. So here we have Storage Manager, which allows you, for Snowflake, it's a GUI that allows you to search access for database views, create or drop, and it allows you the table and storage view. So you can see how much your database is going to grow. You can predict how much it is going to grow, who's hitting it. You can also see who's sharing stuff. We have the sharing manager, so you can see a GUI into the shares and those managed accounts that you have within Snowflake. And then you have a resource manager for session warehouses and resource monitors if you want to see what the resources are being used. And then you have a security manager to clearly define, the tree view for users group, who has access, where they're getting in, who's using the views, who's creating alter drops, and how the graph views are using. So you can get to the DBA tools strictly from within here, and it's offered for the different database management software. So not only do you have the capability for Snowflake, but you also have it for different. Oracle has many different views that you'll do specifically for Oracle from within there, but typically it's instance, resource, stages, and move on. So now what we have from here, so we have an entity example of an entity relationship diagram. I talked about somebody who's building the database from scratch, or they might be reverse engineering. If we were on Oracle and we required a SQL Server database and I wasn't exactly sure what the relationships on that database or how it was organized, I could attach that database, reverse engineer it, and I can get a graphical representation. If they don't have any keys, I can infer some of the keys by the naming convention and allow to get a graphical representation from that. Within Aqua Data Studio, we also have what is called a projects tab. Now, if you're on a DevOps or data ops team and you're trying to do DevOps or data ops team and you're trying to communicate and collaborate with people on your team, you can use the projects tab. The projects are comprised of Aqua scripts, which are proprietary scripts that we run within Aqua Data Server, Aqua Data Studio for creating scripts, and then we have server connections for this server like I'd set up. So I set one up for Snowflake, that's server connections, and then the user files that you're going to use. You're going to store those scripts, you're going to keep them from within there. And what they do is they provide a self-contained programming unit that allows you to create a set of Aqua scripts that work on a specific set of databases. So I can run multiple scripts on multiple databases and I can get really powerful. That's the difference between having a tool that's been in the market for a period of time. Once a project is completed, it may be exported and shared with any of the other users that have Aqua Data Studio, so you can be on here. I wanted to highlight some of these templates because as you have junior people on your team, there's some things that you might want to do. So we have some canned templates that we deliver, and we also allow you the capability to build those. So for example, if I wanted to run a script and execute it on multiple servers, I can click here. Or let's say that I talked about, I want to create and email that Excel file that we talked about. I'm not exactly sure how to create it, so I'm going to do it within this template. So here's the GUI. I'm going to set it up, and this one happens to be for SQL Server, and I'm going to say, this is the query that I want to run. I want to select from the doctors table. I want the path to be this, and I want to execute it as whatever my email is based on here, and I fill out the email. What it does is it appears as a template, and it puts in all that information from here. You're going to see it sets up these Lisa on SQL Server 2006 care. This is the database that I've selected. Here's the schema. It's going to select from that doctor's table, and it's going to template doing that. So I don't have to think about creating that script because I'm not really good at scripts. And as I get more and more detailed, I could do this and I could run it in multiple scenarios. So this is what the directory structure looks like for a project for people who are communicating and collaborating from the project level. You can see there are 3 types. We had showed you the servers from within Aqua Data Studio. That's where I set up the Snowflake and showed you the tree view. I had my files to the right and my workspace in the middle, and now this is the project tab. So from the project tabs, what I'm going to have is my Aqua scripts, my servers that I want to run. Here's my Excel file that I created and the Aqua script that I created, and automatically put it in here. And then now I can run it, schedule it, or whatever. So we deliver with 6 cans. I'm just going to go back. These are the ones that we deliver: create an email Excel file, database schema and database explorer, a file transfer, remote command line execution if you want to do that, a multi-server execute, random table and data generation. We automatically do this with the tool set. We have a GUI to that too as well. We've added that, and I'll show you that in a little bit. And then the schema compare, so you can compare schemas. We also have a tool set to that as well if you're not command line, but here's how we do it. We also have integration with source control, SVN, CVS, Git, and Perforce. So if your company you need to strategize and you need to make sure your developers are following standards and checking in and checking out, you can set this up and integrate in there for your database developers to be able to do that. So I talked about the tools within Aqua Data Studio and how do we help you manage these tools in complex environments. Here's where we do it. So where we went over the query for setting up your queries, we went over the automation for automating those queries and helping you with some of those statements. Then we have the query builder to further help you with building queries. The query builder I showed you from somebody who's junior, but it can also be used for somebody who's really advanced but doesn't want to type all that information. So if I just drag and drop those tables across, then when I set up my query builder, it gives me the SQL statement down below. I don't have to worry about making mistakes on my typing. I can just cut and paste that and put it right into a script from there as well. And then we haven't covered visual analytics. We're going to get into what we do with all this data once we get to that point in time. We covered the ER modeler for registering that, and now the tool set. So I talked about each one of these tool sets, and I talked about the data masking. You can get to here from the menus, or you can right click and get to any one of these screens, and it's context sensitive. It passes in the server connection screen and it goes from there. So here's one of the tools, example of synchronizing your schema. You can see I have two different schemas within here. I have an Oracle database, I have an HR schema, and I have the Oracle Release 2 schema. These are different versions, so I'm comparing them. And then it highlights the different areas, and it gives you the color coordination based on how you set it up. You can change these colors or do whatever you want. These are the typical default colors, but it tells you what they mean. And as you can clearly see, I have something over here, but I don't have over here. And how do I want to do it? Do I want to sync them up? What do I want to do from within here? So when you're thinking about doing stuff with all this data and you're on the team, you need to support the citizens analyst storytelling role and decision making with a tool that addresses the key challenges. The challenges of somebody who's an analytic person are broaden the access to a wide variety of data sources, because usually people are in a hybrid environment. Simplify the query and analyst task to be able to help you with writing those queries and get the data out. And provide a robust palette of graphs and charts for effective visualizations, and provide an environment for development, collaboration, and integration. Because the developers, DBAs, and the analytic people are all in the same tool, using it the same way, you're providing an environment where everybody is using the same tool and collaborating and communicating within that. So I talked about where you run the queries and you get the result set. So from here is a perfect example. I have my my particular databases where I have the color coordination. Blue is something that I use from my perspective. Red is the production database. Blue is my development box, and green is my testing environment. Passes test, then it goes into production. So this is how I start out, blue. So this is a test box, but I'm going to do some reporting on it. I'm an analytic person and I want to see what's going on. So I selected from this particular table, which is a information about a bike shop. And I get my result sets down here and I go, oh, okay, that looks pretty good. Now what I do is I click this little button and immediately I'm going to populate it into Visual Analytics. So these are some of the features, and I'm going to show you what happens automatically with it. I build the data visualizations by drag and dropping those rows from within here. This is what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to create different types of charts, or 50 types of charts of pie table area. I'm going to save a worksheet, or I'm going to create a dashboard if I want to create multiple worksheets and share the data. I can export it to PDF, HTML, and I can extract the data or carry the data along with it. So it can become extremely powerful. So this is what it would automatically look like if I dragged it into the Visual Analytics tool. This is one of the default visualizations, and you can see I have all the charts over here. And what happens is that I built a Visual Analytics dashboard with these three particular types. What I did was I said, okay, I want to see profit by product category. And I dragged it over here, and immediately it gave me the chart. So what it does is it divides the data based on the data types. So it's going to do dimensions and measures. And then when I drag it onto the particular area, it's going to say, okay, what do you want to do with it? You have this graphical chart. Well, immediately I can see within 2 seconds by clicking this little graph chart right here and loading the data into here, immediately I can see, but these particular locks are selling the most of, and how do I go about doing that? So if I want to take that information and I want to create it in a bike chart, but I want to show the regions that are doing the most, I can click it once and clearly see that in California, they're selling the most of those. So what are they doing in California that we're not doing? Of course, it's a larger region, you know, so I have to defer from the analytics from there. I can color coordinate what I want it to do, and I can get a graphical representation of what it's doing over time by using this. So on this particular worksheet, I have profit by product category, I have profit by state, I divided it up, and then weekly sales over time, I've divided it out even further from within there. So I have a dashboard that clearly disseminates what I've done over the period of time with my analytics tool. So within Aqua Data Studio, within 5 minutes, it's clearly easy to be able to communicate and collaborate within all those roles and responsibilities and get to all those databases from within there. You can not only do your database environments are often are more complicated, it's not a single type of data store. You have relational, NoSQL, or cloud databases, but you also have database professionals that must perform multiple tasks across all of them. Managing different platforms, running your queries, creating data analysis, and then it makes it easier. So you can get a 14-day trial of Aqua Data Studio by going out to aquafold.com and you can get all these. So I'm going to open it up to questions and answers. I left 15 minutes, so if anybody has any questions and answers to be able to do that. I know I covered this data pretty quickly, and I didn't cover everything that we offer because it is such a robust tool and a mature tool. It's been on the market for over 20 years. I want to open it up to some questions.
Yeah, Lisa, we had a couple questions come in during the presentation. The first question here is, with Aqua scripts, can I automate the generation of the ER diagram and data dictionary?
Yeah, what you can do is you can pull the scripts over for the data dictionary as long as you have access to those tables.
Great. The next question we had come in from the attendees here is, can I share my visual analytics dashboard with other users, and in what format?
Yes, you can share those visual analytic tools. They come in different for HTML, XML, and you can also deliver the data with them as well. If they're an Aqua Data Studio user, then they have the visual analytics tools and they can pull it up from within there, but you can also cut and paste and save it into PDF or an XML and share those.
Great. A couple other questions here. For developers, do you offer source control?
Yes, we offer the different versions of source control. I think I have them up here. We have SVN, CBS, Git, and Perforce.
Wonderful. Next question. Can I create my own templates in the project tab?
You can, yes. Where I actually have, I'll show you exactly where you have the none selection. You can create your own templates here. So where it's none, you can specify. It'll give you a template and then you can create what you want to from within here. You just fill in the information.
All right. So the next question looking through is, in order to share projects, does all the users have to have Aqua Data Studio?
Yes, they have to have Aqua Data Studio in order to get that projects tab. That's why you need to communicate and collaborate using the one tool.
Okay. Next question is, when setting up Aqua Data Studio, can I do one setup and deploy that setup to the group?
Yeah, which is kind of nice. There's variations that you can do. Those are all file types, and in Aqua Data Studio, you have your home directory and you have connections. So if you set up the connections within those file types, you can share those connections. Like a lot of times our engineers will set up a particular database when we're actually in the engineering process, and they'll send me the connection file. Now, we usually don't share a password, so we usually put in our own password. So at the time of connection, they would usually put in their password. We try not to do that, but we've actually added to where they can add in the password of the file as well, so they don't have to do that. So one person can deploy all of that, and then you can change the individuality too just by editing those connection files once you get them. So it's kind of nice. It allows you to do that.
Okay, great.